various crime families into what has become known as the New World Order on one side, and vying against the um, university system which was created by the British conquest of Europe after the Second World War, and the linking of the British and German university systems, um, which created the European Union. Now, as this develops and as from simply a coal and steel tariffs organisation into what has become the European Union, a federal trading economic zone, and maybe eventually, because of the single currency and maybe a fiscal union, into a European um, project which is based on pan-European nationalism and social democracy and maybe common immigration borders and eventually um, a European monetary fund and European European but British trained armed forces. Um, this is vied against the NWO, the New World Order, who is based on Exxon, Halliburton companies which are linked together, which threatened Hank Paulson to deny Lehman Brothers the the funds to continue trading, and this led eventually to the collapse of the international financial banking system. Now, although they're crime families, the Freemasonry Zionist group, which of course is not, which of course has tangential links, but they are rivals, um, and is linked to neoconservatism and versus ultra-conservatism, because of course neoconservatism is a paternal form of big government conservatism rather than Freemasonry ultra-conservatism. Um, but both are extremely nationalistic in terms of the expansion of American power and Israeli power, of course, in the Middle East and across the world. And of course the United States, in terms of its government, which is a completely separate entity, um, has more in common with the European Union. And it's good that they do, because of course they have links to, they control the CIA, and they have control over the sea routes of the world, as particularly in the Malacca Strait, which China gets most of its oil and trade routes through, the Suez Canal and other and the Panama Canal. Of course, the communist Chinese, which of course they base their view on intellectual views, and as the Soviets on Marx, who gave a warped interpretation of socialism, which of course came from the which of course social democracy of course had English roots, as the English were the first ones to create unions and gain representation through a parliament. This you can see from Wat Tyler to the English civil wars to the bringing in of William of Orange, which of course was within the context of the Protestant and Catholic rivalries in the Reformation, which killed 50% of Germany's population and caused great amount of trouble in Britain, and then of course later Northern Ireland, which led to Catholic sentiments being linked with Celtic nationalism, and then developing on to be a kind of tension between Great Britain and the Irish people. Before 1945 and after 1945, and from the Attlee government onwards, but the reason why Stephen King described his idea of debt, burning of the book slayers, which I use as a euphemism, and was drawn back towards the the time of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, which were pre-capitalist societies in the sense of capitalism being based on a type of neo-feudalism where people own all the means of production in terms of different vying families, both ones that are outright crime families such as Exxon and Halliburton. The family that controls that is a crime family, but the but there were legitimate families that controlled the means of production, and that is what happened after the Industrial Revolution, which of course leads back to Lucretius, the discovery of Lucretius's book The Nature of Things, and Epictetus's book on Stoic philosophy, right? And it's important to realise that the Roman philosophy of Epicureanism, of course, directly led to the ideas of Thomas Jefferson, who created and Thomas Paine, who created the U.S. Constitution, which increased the spread of both Anglo-Saxon and Nordic and Celtic and Western civilization across the North American continent, and the ideas of the ability of people to own land, which came from the English, the struggle of the Anglo-Saxons and Celts against the Norman invaders, who were outright feudalistic. The idea of private property was very important, and this developed towards the American branch of Western civilization. Whereas in Europe, the need to have more social ideas about how to mend the rift between Protestants and Catholics is arguably one of the routes towards socialism and social democracy. But this also leads back to the fact that in Rome and in the Roman Republic, the Senate and the emperor, although they did lend money from money lenders, there was slavery. The Romans controlled the supply of salt, which, of course, as in like the modern central banks control the fiat money supply, means that the labour of slaves, because they were physically and biologically dependent on salt in their diet, as we are as much, and the Romans, of course, from their labours gained the gold that they dug up out of the ground. We are as much dependent for our food, our water, our buying electricity and gas to heat our homes on the supply of money, which comes from central banks. But central banks, unlike the university system or to use Zionism is perhaps an incorrect term, or the Freemasonry New World Order group, who are militaristic. The university system of Europe has democratically elected governments attached to it. It has, and the central banks are under the control of those governments through the university system, the security forces, and the army, the armed forces. I mean, we could shut down central banks. So people like Ron Paul, particularly, who have said the solution is to go back to the gold standard. They're ignoring some basic facts that by removing it from the elite of central banks, who may not be accountable, like the Federal Reserve is not as accountable perhaps as the Bank of England, we'd simply be creating another elite, an elite of gold investors who can change and manipulate the price of gold to cause crashes and other things. And this happened, of course. The fiat money system, which created by the Medici, was a way for them to make money, but it was also a hedge against deflation, which the gold, gold, of course, being an asset, people don't want to spend gold, so there is deflation and falling prices.